Hello everybody. In this video I'm going to be talking about how to troubleshoot your electric tank style or conventional water heater. Now these things are pretty much just a big tank, and it's got an upper and lower thermostat, and it's got an upper and lower element in it, and those four parts are really all the working parts of this water heater. The rest of it, like I said, is just a big tank. Now if you've got an older house and you got water pouring out the bottom of the tank is probably rusted out or it's cracked or something like that, and you're just going to have to get a new water heater. But as long as there's no water coming out of it and you just don't have any hot water, you don't know what's wrong with it, it's probably going to be either your elements or your thermostat. So the first thing you want to go do is go check your breaker box and make sure you find the one that says WH or water heater, and make sure that breaker's not tripped. Sometimes those breakers can trip, but when you flip that thing on, make sure it stays on. And then you're going to come back over here to your water heater and open this thing up and take a look inside. The next place I'm going to go is to this upper element. I just always start with the upper one, and for this job I highly recommend you get a 6-in-1 or 9-in-1 screwdriver, because it's got all the tips on it and you only have to have one screwdriver in your toolbox. This is a flathead screw up here, but it's also a little nut. I like to use a little nut driver there to remove that screw, just because it's easier than the little old flathead screw. Now under this cover there's generally a big piece of insulation right there. I went ahead and took that out to make things simpler, and then you're going to have a cover on top of your thermostat and element. Now I do have the power on, so you got to be careful. In order to do this job, you're going to want some type of little voltmeter. It doesn't have to be anything special, but you're going to want to put this in the volt mode. And what we're doing, and I hope you can see that, yeah, you can see that, is we're just going to test to make sure this thing has power. So we put one probe on one leg here, and then we're going to touch the tank. We're going to ground it out to the tank, and you should see that voltmeter right about 120, and then test the other side right about 120. Now this is a 240 water heater, but it's got two legs on it. We might get, yeah, there's your 240 right there. Alright, so we know this water heater has power. The next thing to check would be move on down to this little red button here. Now that is a, I call it a thermal overload switch, but if this thing were to overheat and get over 180 degrees, that thing's going to pop out on you. And there's some other things that can cause that to pop out. But push that in, and that's like a breaker that goes send power down to your element. Now you can check to see if this thing was cold and you've just turned the power back on, this element should be warming up. And to test that, you're gonna ground it to the tank and ground it to the element, and it is receiving power. Now, this thing's cold, I just turned it on. Now if it was warm, you might have to crank that little dial on up to very hot just to make sure, and it should click. It should make a clicky noise. You can turn it all the way down, see if it shut off. But this tank is cold. Yeah, see, it's still getting power. All right. Pop, there's that little click. Typically in new construction, your thermostats aren't what goes bad. What typically happens to us is these water heaters get dry fired, which means this water heater didn't have water in it, and the electrician hooked the power up to it and turned it on, and with no water in these things, those elements will burn up and they'll pop, they'll blow apart. So the next thing we're going to test is the actual element, because that's typically what goes bad. Now in order to do that, I'm gonna go shut the power down. Okay, I turned the power off. Now in order to test an element, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to take these wires off. Now you can take them off up there, you can take them off right here at the element. I typically am going to take them off right here at the element. And while you're in here looking around, look at these wires. Make sure nothing's burnt up, because I've seen that happen before. The wire could just be charred somehow or another, got grounded out or something, and it burnt the wires up. I have repaired these things with burnt wires by feeding new wires down through the tank. But typically, I mean, you can save a water heater that way, but typically if you've got burnt wires or something like that, especially if the water heater's 10 years old, I'd just go ahead and replace it. And look around, make sure it's not bleeding rust, as I call it, but there's no water pouring out and stuff. Of course, like I said, this one's new. And we do new construction, so most of our stuff is brand new. Now let's check, and we're going to check a different thing here. We're going to switch it over to continuity, and this has an auto setting on it, so you might have to cycle through the settings. But it's the one that looks like, well, a cell phone signal laying on its side. Touch your two contacts together. See if you get that beep. Kind of just testing the voltmeter there. Now we got our wires off. We're going to test the continuity across this element. It's beeping. That's telling me that element's good. If that element has been dry fired and it's bad, it's going to blow apart, and you're not going to get that beep beep. But that's pretty much it, and you're going to do the same on the bottom. But like I said, in new construction, most of the time these things only get filled up about halfway. Somebody hooks up the power and throws the breaker, and it pops that top element. Most of the time when that happens, I have homeowners tell me that we had really hot water, but only for like 5 minutes, and then it got really cold. And that's a symptom of that top element being blown. But check your breakers, check that switch, make sure it has power, because new construction, if it doesn't have power getting to it, it's not the plumber's problem. It's called the electrician. But that's basically it. You're going to do the same thing again to the bottom element. Well, that's the basics on how to troubleshoot a tank style water heater. There's not much to it. Like I said, it's just a tank. Make sure your breaker's on, make sure that switch is in, make sure you got a good element, and it doesn't hurt to turn that little screw and make sure you get that click on the thermostat. Most of the time it's not the thermostat unless you're dealing with a much older heater, but it won't give you power to that element if you've got it cranked all the way up to hot, it won't throw power to that element. Now if it is busted, you have some choices out there, but I would go get what I call a plumber's pack at Supply House. That's what, if you ask for a plumber's pack, this is what they're going to hand you. But it's pretty much a universal kit. It comes with your upper and lower thermostats, and it's got 2 elements in it. Now you can buy these pieces separate, and if you think it's just that element, you can go pick up just a single element. Now this one's a little bit different. It's looped back on itself. This one has a lot more surface area. A lot of times you see heaters with these in the bottom, because it is heating the water in the bottom first. This will heat up a lot faster, but it's going to use a lot more energy. But there's your whole thing, and when I do this out in the field, I use the whole pack. Whenever I have a homeowner say I don't have hot water, I go ahead and do the whole thing. I'll replace both thermostats and both elements. I mean, you're inside the heater already, and if something blows up here, you don't know what it may affect it down here. So just remember that. You will have to have a special wrench for this. But it's really not that bad. Make sure you turn the water off and drain this thing down before you go pulling elements out of it, though. You'll make that mistake once. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody.